Welcome back to Raptor-One.
Raptor-One, Voyagers of the Stars. Chapter 16, The Luminarium. The cutting note waited where Juno had refused to look. 3 radiants were waking behind them, one kindled by vow, one by truth in motion, one by memory kept, and their light ran in quiet threads across the last constellation. But the 4th vector, the one Juno had skirted, kept pressing back into the map like a sliver under skin. Every time Lyra checked the paths, the shard redrew it first, a thin blade of a route angled toward a beacon whose signature made the hull's panels buzz on a frequency no instrument could name. Juno finally stopped arguing with the map and set her palm on the glass. "All right," she whispered. "We'll go." Kael didn't hide his dislike. Anything that makes a ship sing without asking is rude. "Then we ask back," Lyra said, and eased Raptor-One onto the blade. The geometry changed under them, angles widening as if space were a door being opened into a brighter room. Lesser beacons thinned. The latticework of lines sharpened until even Kael, who distrusted metaphors on principle, could see the structure of it, a near-infinite cage built from light and empty distance. The cutting radiant sat at the far end like the point of a spear. Up close it resembled an unspun world, a hollow sphere of prisms interlocked at edges, facets breathing in faint pulses, each plane catching the starless dark and throwing it back in color. Juno's breath fogged the inside of her visor, though there was no air to chill it. "Luminarium," she said, naming it the way she named songs when they first found them. "It knows how to break things gently." Kael checked a readout and grimaced. "That's not comforting." A seam flowered in the sphere, petals of glass unfurling without moving. Lyra took them through. Inside, the luminarium was not a chamber, but a sky, planes and corridors of refracted light curving away until they met themselves. The ship floated to a halt on nothing. The shard pulsed once, and the floor decided to exist. "Hold," Lyra said, though nobody moved. Even Kael had learned by now that this was a place where force was a kind of noise. The luminarium spoke without sound. Song recognized. Bond, fractured/enduring/phase lag present. Function, min/unmake. Cost required. Kael's eyebrows went up. I heard mend and unmake in the same breath. Juno nodded, eyes on the light. Same tool, different hands. Lyra stepped forward. The band on her wrist warmed with Juno's quiet fear and Kael's wary attention. A structure coalesced in front of them, an altar of sorts made from crossed beams of glass. Above it, 3 small lattices hung, each set to a slightly different color: dusk blue, iron gray, ash gold. The colors steadied, and Lyra's skin prickled in recognition. Not names, exactly, but echoes, the parts of the chord that tended to carry when each of them spoke. The luminarium shifted meaning like a prism shifting rainbows. 2 options. Coherence, erase variance, sync phase, reduce bleed, cost equals loss of edge/distinctness. Braid, preserve variance, rephase, retain bleed, bounded, cost equals vulnerability/shared exposure. Choice binds, ****. Kael barked a laugh with no humor in it. "So, smooth us into one voice that's easy to aim, or keep us 3 and risk the noise." Juno's hands tightened around the shard. Coherence would fix the lag. "And grind us into paste," Kael snapped. "Take away the angles that kept us alive." Lyra heard them both in the band, felt Kael's old vow flex. "Don't let anyone file your teeth," and Juno's ache. It would be so quiet to be one sound. The luminarium reflected the arguments across its facets and sent them back gentled, as if it were built to keep words from cutting too deep. Lyra asked the only question that mattered. If we choose coherence, what exactly is erased? The prisms answered in images. Kael, standing over a console with a shout too early for Lyra to hear, the lag gone, the ship moving like a single hand, his temper sanded to patience, his instincts slowed to gentleness. Juno, listening into silence without pain because the loudest parts of her hearing had been shaved down to safe. Lyra, steady in a chair that felt very much like command, edges softened where the orchard had taken them, the hollow filled with something that felt like certainty and tasted like ash. The images hurt more for how good they looked. Lyra swallowed. And Braid? Kael's anger kept sharp enough to cut through panic, but wrapped in rules that would cost him blood to break. Juno's listening turned outward by default, doors propped open so resonance could pass through her instead of pooling and burning, the openness leaving her exposed to voices she would rather avoid. Lyra's hollow left alone, mapped and acknowledged so she would stop bracing for its return. In exchange, the bond would move more freely through her, more pain, more clarity, more risk. Braid, Lyra said, softly, before she realized she had chosen. Kael's jaw flexed. His eyes asked, and the band carried the rest. She let him hear the truth she didn't want to speak, that the version of herself coherence offered would be a fine captain and a poor Lyra. He grunted something like consent. Juno didn't speak at all. The shard's pulse settled against the choice like a shoulder against a door she'd decided to hold open. The altar shone. New elements grew. 3 loops like needles threaded with light, each loop humming at the pitch of a wristband. The luminarium set the terms in clean lines. Braid protocol. Each offers one edge to keep, one wall to lower. Each sets one boundary others will honor. All share one truth to be written into the glass. Proceed? Lyra exhaled. Edges, walls, boundaries. She lifted her wrist. Edge to keep. I will make the call when the room goes quiet. She saw Kael's flinch. She nodded at him. Without command. Wall to lower, she forced out. I will let you see when I'm afraid. Juno's eyes shone. Kael looked away. Boundary, Lyra finished. My hollow is not a vacancy to be filled. It's part of how I pilot. You don't patch it when it aches. The needle loop brightened and held its position, like a paragraph written. Kael rolled his shoulder as if loosening a knotted muscle. Edge to keep. I hit first when time is measured in heartbeats. If I hesitate, we die. He cut Lyra a look. But I'll say why after, and I'll hear the answer. Wall to lower. I'll let people put their hands near the lock. His throat worked on the rest. I'll assume help before harm. Once. Boundary, he said, grim relief in the naming. You do not use my past as leverage. It's not a tool in an argument. The loop around his band steadied. Juno had stopped crying somewhere in the explanations. The quiet on her face wasn't serenity, but attention. Edge to keep. I listen farther than it's comfortable. That's how we find doors. Wall to lower. I won't filter as much. The song goes through me, not into a jar I keep. She hesitated. Boundary. When I say it's too loud, we stop. We don't call that weakness. We call it survival. Her loop sealed. The prisms waited. Shared truth. Lyra let her eyes close and spoke into the hum. We will not trade our names for a cleaner song. Kael added, we'll pay blood before we pay ourselves away. Juno, very soft. We will carry memory and change. Both. even when it hurts. The luminarium drank the words like the radiant had drunk their vows. Light threaded the needle loops, slipped into their bands, and braided itself with the faint architect filaments already woven there. Pain followed, but it was clean pain, the ache of a stitch done with skill. Lyra felt the bond pull taut and then settle into a new tension, not the ragged jerkiness that had been driving them into walls, not the dangerous slack that let ghosts wander from mind to mind. The lag didn't vanish. It shrank into the space of a breath, predictable enough to fly by. Kael took a breath and didn't realize he had matched Lyra's cadence until she smiled without meaning to. Juno blinked and realized she could stand another step nearer the shard without flinching. Status? Kael asked the air, because someone always asked. The luminarium obliged. Braid complete. Phase offset reduced, bounded. Bleed, permitted, limited/consent. Mask unlocked. Refraction veil, temporary/degrades with use/not compatible with weapons fire. Warning, veil destabilizes under certainty fields. Optional. Coherence may be chosen later, irreversible. Kael tapped the words none of them could technically see. Weapons off if veil on. And the autumn's certainty can crack it. So it's a cloak until it isn't. Until it isn't, Lyra agreed. But it gives us places to breathe. Juno wiped her face with the heel of her hand. It also means we can keep flying without shredding each other on every turn. The relief in her voice was a softer song than anything the luminarium could make. They weren't done. The luminarium brightened a fraction and showed one more price, small beside the first, but sharp if you weren't ready. Proof. 3 facets tilted inward, each asking for a memory to etch, not to take, but to show, to be stored in the luminarium's corridors so the constellation would know these particular carriers had chosen a braid over a blur. Lyra stepped forward first and gave it a small, stubborn thing no one else would have noticed. The first time she realized the hollow felt useful, not only like loss, and empty where other people's expectations used to live. Kael put his fingers on the glass and let it take the feel of a lock opening because a child refused to treat his hand like a key. The facet glowed warmer for it. Juno pressed both palms to a plane and shared the shape of silence when the reef died. Not the catastrophe, but the after, when the song had no mouth but still wanted to be carried. The luminarium held that quiet without trying to fix it. The sphere brightened. Somewhere far outside, another radiant registered the braid like a note struck. The constellation adjusted its sums. On the Raptor-One console, new lines inked themselves toward 2 further lights. 6, Kael said, meaning lit beacons, not the count the map preferred. 5 lit, 1 engaged, Juno corrected automatically, which made Kael grin in spite of himself. Lyra listened. The band was still a scar, still tender. But when Kael thought now, she heard before the word. When Juno's listening shifted toward overload, the warning shivered along Lyra's skin with enough time to pull back. It wasn't perfect. It was theirs. They turned to go. The seam opened as if it had been waiting for their feet to move in that direction. Out in the array, the cutting note of the luminarium had softened into something that no longer made the hull wince. They didn't get 3 ship lengths before the scope coughed up a shape none of them had seen before. Not red like autumn, not blue like Alliance. A slick, dark curve on the edge of range, there and gone, masked by geometry as skillfully as they were. Kael's hands went still. That's not one of ours. Juno tilted her head the way she did when a chord was just out of tune. It's not singing like the autumn, and it's not the resonance. She hesitated. It's listening and not listening, like someone built a shell around a choir. Lyra didn't take her eyes off the dark curve. We've seen the Alliance mimic resonance in toys. We haven't seen them carry it in a hull. Until now, Kael said. The shape winked out. A second later, the array returned a ripple, very faint, very cold, propagating in a straight line that ignored the constellation's bends. The ship's instruments labeled it with nothing at all. The band translated it as a taste of metal. Silence, manufactured. Juno's hand closed convulsively around the shard. Whatever that was, it made a place the song can't cross. Lyra swallowed. We keep the veil for when we can. We keep our guns for when we must. We light what we can reach before that thing learns the map. Kael's mouth worked as if on a smile he didn't want. That's a plan. They slid back into the threads. The refraction veil settled over them like the shade of a tree, cool, thin, fragile. It hummed in counterpoint to the band. When Kael laid a palm on his console, he felt Lyra's attention tilt toward him a beat early. When Juno breathed out, the ship seemed to adjust its own lights to the length of that breath. For one long corridor of space, Lyra let herself believe they had bought more than minutes. The luminarium receded like a memory well kept. The last constellation watched with a patience that wasn't passive. Far off, behind, faint but real, Haven's cord held. Next radiant, Lyra said. Left-hand arc, Juno murmured. Dim, but reachable. It wants a promise about what we won't do. Kael snorted softly. Won't is my favorite word. Lyra's hands settled on the yoke. Then let's see if it likes yours. They flew under the lines, where the veil ran thickest, where the autumn's certainty had to choose between 3 wrong answers. The ship's hum and the bond's hum matched for a handful of breaths. It wasn't peace. It was flight. Behind them, the luminarium dimmed to its steady watch. In its glass, 3 small marks shone, edges kept, walls lowered, boundaries named, and a truth written in narrow script. We will not trade our names for a cleaner song. Outside, the dark curve returned for a heartbeat in a sector the map called between. It did not pursue. It measured. The last constellation didn't flinch. It had waited for ages. It could wait a little longer while 3 imperfect voices chose the harder kind of mend.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to be notified about upcoming releases to the Raptor-One series, please subscribe. This has been a Bad Karma Drone production.